Oh yeah, sorry.
Yes.
Brian.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, this one I read. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. I heard some things. Yeah. Oh, her second.
Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I want to get one. Yeah, that's one thing.
And that's not what we're talking about. Reading fast.
Well, when they're like, I was thinking. Your first one, you know, so now I'm thinking like. Yeah, that's so.
So just another minute or so, then we'll talk about it together. Yeah.
What do you have listening? Yeah. Like, Repairing body.
All right, looks like everyone done. All right, let's talk about it together for a minute and then I'll collect these from you. And again, these are real stories that were actually in the news, which I think makes them all the more interesting for some reason. It seems like these are things that actually did, right? So let's talk about Brian first. Anyone want to share? What did you think was going on with Brian? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, right, and I think that's perfect, right, that he experienced something traumatic, there's nothing physically wrong with him, but he's clearly converted that trauma into some kind of physical symptom, right, and again, it's that dramatic, like loss of a sensation, loss of a sense in some way, very, very characteristic of that, I think that's perfect. How about Blanca and her two children? Yeah,
Not challenging something like
okay.
although she probably didn't do it because she didn't consistently make her son sick. She probably did it to her daughter at the time. She saw her daughter in the hospital and her daughter's condition continually worse.
Yeah.
Worsened over for each visit that they had, or like assigned time that she had to visit her daughter in the hospital. So
Yeah.
Unless she's carrying a lot of illness all the time with her, she's definitely taking some thought.
Yeah, which is so sad, right? But it definitely seems to be the case here, the Munchausen by proxy. And I can't remember if I mentioned it in this class or my other one, but really common whenever a child goes into the hospital for any reason, like a social worker will come check on them. Like even if it's just a routine visit or something like completely nothing that would cause any kind of suspicion, it's pretty common for a social worker to come check. So the fact that this is happening, every time that she get better and then we get worse again, it's pretty that seems to be what's going on there. I would agree. How about Tom? Anyone thoughts on Tom, our Chicago lawyer? Anybody else? What do we think? We see how go over, yeah.
I think it's almost started because how mistakes that understand things for something serious.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's not really anything serious because it could be the stress that patient's living.
Yeah, and I think that fits really well, right? That illness anxiety disorder, and you can see how, the fact that his dad passed away from cancer could maybe like fuel this a little bit, like feed into it a little bit. I sometimes have people say it's somatic symptom disorder, but he doesn't have each one of those symptoms. He doesn't have a sexual symptom or a neurological symptom. So I think that one fits the best. Yeah. I don't think that you're genetically it depends on the cancer. It's not an easy answer. There are some cancers that are more vulnerable, like genetically. I know, for example, like colon cancer is something that tends to run a little bit in families. Breast cancer tends to run more in families, but not all of them are that way. So I think it depends somewhat on the type of cancer and who it is in your family who has had it. So, the fact that he's worried about it, I think is totally fine. And if someone in your family did have cancer, it's probably better to be a little more vigilant, right? But the fact that he is going to such lengths, I think, is where it starts to cross that line. More? Probably this one again, pretty interesting, I think, right? But how about Leslie? Any thoughts on Leslie? Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm.
It's like the passage explaining the case study kind of shows that like she had a parent in the first place.
Yeah.
It's just kind of setting up everything.
Mm-hmm.
Right. She never had any children, she never had a stillbirth,
Yeah.
the urine grand, stuff like that. So it's just like a horrifying case of her wanting to grab the attention of the family.
Yeah, it's pretty extreme, right?
Probably really traumatic. Consoling a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, so you could either say Munchausen's or obviously like factitious disorder. Either one would have been totally fine. And it was interesting. I was writing this up like last week, and I was talking to my partner, and she was saying that her sister, so Kim, right, that I told you about, that they threw her a huge baby shower and all these things for a baby that like never came. Like she never started to show, the baby never like showed up, and like totally reminded me of this. So it's like, oh, look, Kim pulled this one too. Like Kim did them all, right? Bad Kim, right? But really wild. To do this whole process, just to get attention. And that's where you start to see how important it would be to go back and where did this start? Like, where did you start getting these ideas that this is the only way to get attention from people? And how can we maybe teach you a better way? Because this is a pretty unhealthy way, right, to get attention from family and friends and so on. I hope you kind of enjoyed the stories. I look forward to reading your scenarios that you came up with. I used to pick 2 and put them on the exam for extra credit, but since you're taking the exams online, that probably won't happen this time. But I will look forward to reading them. If you want to pass those forward, I'll come around and grab them from your row. Okay, so just a couple of other thoughts here in this chapter. We talked about somatoform disorders and factitious disorders. There's a lot of these physical stress disorders. And I know the names in this chapter are a little bit obnoxious and confusing, right? Like we have like somatization, somatoform, now we have psychophysiological or psychosomatic disorders. There's a lot of overlap. But these disorders, these psychophysiological disorders, psychophysiological is like mind, body, basically, or psychosomatic, mind, body. These are things that are really common, the ones that are up here on this slide. And I imagine a lot of you, either yourself or people in your life, like struggle with these. These are very, very common psychophysiological or psychosomatic disorders. It's an actual illness or problem that results from an interaction of physical and emotional factors. Okay, so people are actually experiencing, migraine headaches or ulcers or asthma. You're actually having physical issues. And there are probably physical things contributing to that in your body, but it's being exacerbated or maybe driven quite a bit by things like anxiety and stress. And really common ones up here are things like migraine headaches. Right? I don't know if any of you in here get migraines, but they're very much triggered by stress and anxiety. When people have high levels of stress, it's more likely to bring them on. Muscle contraction headaches are like TMJ related issues. I tend to clench my jaw and I don't ever even realize that I'm doing it. And then it tightens all the muscles in my neck and it gives me headaches. Right? And that's very connected to stress and anxiety. Insomnia is another really big one. People have a hard time sleeping because they're laying there thinking about everything. Right? You're thinking about stuff that's on your mind, stressors that you have, maybe poor sleep habits can be contributing to that. Ulcers are often driven by stress. Asthma can be made worse by stress or triggered by stress. Coronary heart disease and high blood pressure. Right? So all of these things are actual physical issues. And there might be physical things in your body going on, but they can be made worse or even heavily contributed to by things like stress and anxiety. And again, these ones are very, very common, unlike conversion disorder, which tends to be pretty rare. So stress really does take a toll on our system. I think a lot of us tend to roll our eyes when people are like, you need to manage your stress, right? Oh, it's not a big deal. But in the long run, it can actually produce some issues, right? And a lot of people do feel these things when they're under incidences of high stress. There's a bunch of contributors to these different illnesses. One really famous but flawed study was done by 2 researchers, Freeman and Rosenman, like years ago. And they looked at heart-related issues as it related to like personality style. Now, this study was flawed because it was fully funded by tobacco companies. And so there's thought to be maybe an agenda behind it. But some of the takeaways that we can make beyond that are that your personality style does play a role in how you experience stress and maybe your vulnerability to some of these different psychophysiological illnesses. People who are more like competitive, hard-driven, ambitious, always on the go, tend to have higher levels of stress, higher propensity toward things like high blood pressure and coronary heart disease, rather than people who are more like laid back and mellow, which we traditionally call a type B personality, tend to have less issues related to psychophysiological illnesses and heart troubles and so on. So people who are more like, I'm just going to lay against the mountain because it's here, it's not going anywhere, and have that mellow, kind of calm, relaxed personality style, tend to have less susceptibility and vulnerability than people who are maybe more impatient, competitive, ambitious, hard driven. I'm going to conquer the mountain as fast as I can because it's here, right? And this is far from perfect. As I said, it's kind of a flawed research study. And there's way more than type A and B personality. And a lot of us are kind of a little bit of both. But we can make some general conclusions that your personality style and your level of like resiliency and so on might play a role in how vulnerable you are to these illnesses. We also tend to see that there is a very strong connection between stress and sickness, right? During finals week or during exam times, notoriously everybody's sick, right? Like when you're sitting in the classroom, taking in an exam like a final, you tend to hear everyone like coughing and sniffling everywhere around you. Really common that when we have high levels of stress, we tend to get sick, or even maybe right after high levels of stress have passed. And there's a whole branch called psychoneuroimmunology that looks at the relationships between stress and the immune system and illness. And what we know is that when you have a lot of stress, it reroutes all of this energy from your immune system. It impairs your health by disrupting the functioning of your immune system, making you more vulnerable to illness. So when you are stressed out all the time, your immune system is lower and it makes you more vulnerable to getting sick. It can also bring out diseases that have been maybe lying dormant in your system, like shingles, for example, is one that can lie dormant in your system for a long time. And then under high levels of stress could come out and kind of come to the surface. It can make diseases progress faster, right? Things like cancer can progress at a faster rate when people are under a lot of stress. So it's often part of like a health management program to also manage your stress, right? And that's something that we talked a little bit about in the last chapter and are definitely talking about here as well. So definitely a correlation between the immune system and stress in a negative way, right? The more stress we have, the weaker our immune system tends to be, making us more vulnerable to illness. The last kind of thought in this chapter is there are quite a bit of things that people can do to manage some of these things, like these psychophysiological illnesses. A lot of people go to the doctor and get different medications or different procedures, but there are some kind of more behavioral medicine focused things up here that combine psychological and physical interventions together. Things like relaxation training and biofeedback and meditation, finding ways to calm down and maybe like do things like meditating or deep breathing or guided visualization activities. There's a lot of really cool apps for this as well. I don't know if any of you have used the Calm app. It's one of my favorites because it's got these cool little soundscapes that you can put on. You can put on like a rainstorm for like an hour and just put it in the background. And I love doing that. It's also got little stories and meditation and sleep stories that you can listen to at night. So the Calm app is a really cool one. There's also one called Headspace, which is a little more like cognitive behavioral in nature, but it's also a really neat like app. Both of them are free for like certain features, and I think you can pay to have like the full access of them. Mindfulness training, which we might talk a little bit more about later in the semester, learning how to be mindful and present and aware of your surroundings. Hypnosis isn't the most common, but sometimes this can be used as well, right? Putting people into an altered state to plant suggestions and help them to deal with stress and anxiety. Sometimes even looking at like therapy or support groups, but these are all more like behavioral medicine approaches. In general, if you can calm your mind, it will calm your body. And if you can calm your body, it will calm your mind. So even just taking a few deep breaths kind of lowers your physiological arousal. It can help you to feel a little bit calmer. And if you have the time, doing like little guided relaxation exercises or deep breathing exercises can also be really, really helpful for reducing your stress. And I have one that is like my absolute favorite. It's this it's like a walk through the forest visualization. I'll try and remember to see if I can post it on Canvas for you, because it's a really cool, like 10-minute long kind of guided relaxation exercise. I mean, I have it. Do you want to do it? Does anyone want to do it? I got one yes and a so-so. right? Anybody else? I mean, if not, I can just post it for you, but if we want to do it together, we could take the time. Yeah, want to? Okay. So it's 2 yeses. I'm sold. Right? I really only needed 1, but 2 just seals it, right? So I have this thing, it's called a forest walk visualization exercise. So I'll turn off the light, try not to fall asleep, but I'll turn off the light. And I know it's not the easiest to get comfortable in these chairs and surrounded by people in this environment, but try and get as comfortable as you can. All it is, there's nothing to look at up here. It's just an audio. But I'll bring this up, and as I said, it's a little less than 10 minutes. And all they're gonna do is have you close your eyes and kind of like take this walk through the forest and try and picture some things and calm and relax. So I'll bring this up here and then we'll do it together. And do the best you can. If you find that you're distracted, take a minute and be distracted and then come back. That's totally fine. But try and do the best you can to focus. Okay. Here we go.
Guided imagery is a powerful relaxation technique. In this exercise, you will be guided into a beautiful, tranquil forest. As your imagination is guided through various sensory suggestions, your body and mind will respond as though what you are imagining is real. So if you are feeling tense or stressed, this will help shift your mood to one of peace and relaxation. So begin by finding a comfortable place to relax and make sure you're warm. Placing yourself into a nice, comfortable position, either sitting or lying down on a bed, couch, or the floor. And when you're ready, close your eyes. Begin by taking a nice, slow, deep breath, deep into the belly. Hold the breath for a brief moment, and release the breath. Once again, nice deep breath in, hold, and now release. As you release the breath, let go of any tension, surrendering the weight of your body onto the surface that you're lying on. One last time, deep breath in, hold, and now exhale. Feel yourself beginning to relax and let go. Now imagine you're walking along a path in a beautiful, secluded forest on a bright, sunny autumn morning. The path is soft underneath your shoes. You can hear each of your footsteps against the forest floor, where there are fallen leaves, pine needles, twigs, and moss. As you walk along the path, you can feel a gentle, cool breeze caressing your cheeks. You hear the birds singing and the leaves of the trees as they rustle in the wind. As you continue to walk, you feel relaxed and your mind clears more and more with each step you take. The fresh air is revitalizing as you take a nice deep breath in and as you continue to walk through the forest. You notice the tall trees around you. The red and golden leaves look magnificent, and you stop for a moment to take in this beautiful scenery around you. You notice a red leaf falling from a tree as it dances and twirls in the air before slowly fluttering down to rest along with the others. In the distance, you hear the babbling of a stream. As you look ahead, you notice the sun dappling through the trees, and you see the sun reflection upon the gurgling stream that runs along the edge of the forest. You continue to tread carefully into the forest, over the crackling red and golden leaves, and the broken twigs and pine cones that are scattered across the ground. It is very peaceful here, and the deeper you venture into the forest, the deeper into relaxation you fall, and you're filled with a deep sense of peace and tranquility. You pause a while and rest against an old oak tree, and you feel the rough bark of the tree against your fingers. You look down and you notice a patch of soft green moss that covers a smooth, large rock, and its lushness invites you to sit down for a while. The tree welcomes you to lean against its bark so that you feel comfortable. While sitting quietly beneath this oak tree, you enjoy the peace and stillness. You feel nourished by the warmth of the sun on your body, and you feel a deep connection to all that is around you. You feel the warmth of the sun soothing and relaxing your head, your back, your shoulders, arms, and legs. Your whole body is peaceful and relaxed. Take a few moments and enjoy this deep sense of peace and relaxation. Now bring your awareness back to where you're sitting beneath the oak tree and see yourself slowly standing up. You brush off any leaves or moss that may be on your clothes. you take a final look at the beautiful scenery around you. And when you're ready, follow the trail back as you proceed to leave the forest. Now bring your awareness back to the room. Become aware of the surface beneath you. Notice the sounds in the room. Feel yourself awaken. And when you're ready, open your eyes, feeling refreshed, alert, relaxed.
All right, let me close this. So hopefully you're all still awake, right? But I really love that. That's probably my favorite of all of the like guided relaxation ones that I've ever tried. I think because it's a forest, so that's why I like it so much. But I do these a lot because I think that they're really helpful. And the more you do them, the easier that they tend to get. Like, so if you found yourself like distracted multiple times, that's really common. Like I started thinking about, don't forget to set my fantasy football lineup for tonight. And I was like, no, stop. You're supposed to be meditating, right? Like trying to remind myself to come back. And so they take a little bit of practice if you haven't done them before. But if you notice, right, and I always pay attention to this, but when I started, I could feel a lot of like muscle tension. And by the end, I kind of feel that like a little bit less. And so when you do these often, you start to get better and better at that. Really common, as I said, from this perspective, to do things like that, or different kind of variations of that. There's a common technique for people who have stress and trauma disorders to create what's called a safe place or a calm place. And it's a really very common thing within this behavioral medicine approach, where you think of somewhere that you tend to feel calm and at peace and safe. And so whenever you're experiencing a lot of stress or anxiety, you're then encouraged to close your eyes and think of your calm place and learn to like then calm down a little bit by visualizing it and thinking of it. My kids try to do this at night when they can't sleep. We're like, okay, picture your forest, right? Picture your beach, right? One of mine is a forest, one's a beach, and the other, oh my gosh, I just forgot what Kaya's is. It's gonna drive me nuts all day. But they all have like their own little thing that they picture as a way to help them calm down. And so doing little things like that can definitely help to lower your physiological arousal, make you feel a little bit better, and help combat some of these different psychophysiological illnesses. So lots of different kind of treatments. And again, if you've never checked out the Calm app, it's pretty cool. And it has a lot of kind of things related to that and like soundscapes and stuff like that as well. Yeah.
The technique that I love, like it's kind of opposite of this, but it has things similar. It's basically like 40 minutes. You try to breathe as like vigorously as you can, like just like in there. It's supposed to like help with like asthma,
Huh. Interesting.
A lot of people, psychedelic things while doing screening technique because they feel like
Huh. That's really interesting, right? I mean, and breathing techniques are a part of a lot of things. I mean, think about like, I always think of Lamaze with like childbirth, right? We have relaxation things like this that we're doing. There's all sorts of different breathing related like techniques because your breath can change your physiological arousal, right? Like taking long, slow breaths calms you down. Taking fast, like deeper, quick breaths can like invigorate you in a different way. Right. So it's interesting how much just breathing can change your physiological state, right? For better or worse, in one way or the other. Okay. All right. We will move on from chapter 8. See, there's forest, right? We'll move on from chapter 8 to chapter 6. So we went a little bit out of order because again, I think chapter 8 followed really well from chapter 5. And now what we'll do is we'll go back. We're going to go to chapter 6, which are mood disorders. And we'll look at that for the rest of today and then into next week. And we will likely have a guest speaker who will come in to talk about suicide prevention and suicidality instead of me covering chapter 7. I'm still working with them. They're still kind of trying to figure out how to resume doing this like normal in our times that we're in now. So we'll see if that happens. Hopefully it does, because I think it's a really cool little training. But before then, we'll talk a little bit about some of the different mood disorders. So we had said before that anxiety was the most common. Anxiety disorders are by far the most common of all disorders. Mood disorders are number 2, right? So if anxiety is the most common, mood disorders would come next. And so we'll look at both ends of the spectrum of mood. We'll look at depression and mania. And then when you combine them together, getting bipolar disorder, some of the causes and treatments and so on. So if we just want to kind of introduce the 2 sides of the spectrum of mood, we can think about mood as having 2 like extreme poles to it. The low end and then the high end. So on the low end of mood, the extreme low end, we would call depression. And the extreme high end of mood, you would call mania. Okay, so these are the extremes, all the way down at the bottom, depression, all the way up at the high end would be mania. Now, most of us are like kind of in here all the time, in like a normal or typical level of mood, right? And depending on our day, when things go well, we might be kind of on the higher end. When things aren't going that well, maybe on the lower end, and a lot of the time kind of in the neutral, typical middle ground. With mood disorders, what we're looking at are psychological and emotional extremes. So when people are really, really down for long periods of time, or really, really up for long periods of time, kind of longer or more intense than you would expect or is typical. And I think most people are a little more familiar with depression than mania, but depression would be the low end, and we'll talk a lot more about the criteria for depression in a moment, but it's that low, sad state, significant levels of sadness, lack of energy, lots of low feelings of self-worth. Maybe you're not finding pleasure in the things you used to enjoy. You have a lot of those kind of related symptoms way down here at the bottom. And mania is the complete opposite, like polar end here, where you have like a very up state, almost like a euphoric, frenzied state, where you have exaggerated beliefs about yourself. Maybe you have a very difficult time sleeping, you make reckless and impulsive decisions. They're very different ends of the spectrum. And people can have only depression, or if they have depression and mania, then we call that bipolar disorder. Now, it used to be called manic depression, right, which makes a lot of sense, mania and depression. But the reason they changed the name for it a couple of DSMs ago is there's actually 2 different types. There's a bipolar 1 and a bipolar 2, which we'll talk about probably next week, because there are different levels of mania that a person can experience. So instead of being manic depression like it used to be, now we call it bipolar disorder. Somebody has both poles, 2 poles of extremes of mood. Okay? And again, there are 2 different types, which we'll get to probably next week. So we have the low end and we have the high end, and people can have one or the other, or both, occurring in like an alternating fashion. And I would imagine a lot of you know somebody who struggles with depression or maybe bipolar disorder. Again, these are very, very common disorders. A lot of people struggling, especially with depression. That's much, much more common than mania. Yeah.
So I'm really curious though. So obviously you can have depression on its own, but what about mania?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? So typically we don't just diagnose mania by itself. Technically you can have it alone, but it's pretty uncommon. Most of the time if people have mania, they've also had like the depressive end. So what we see a lot is we'll diagnose them with depression, and then if they ever have a manic episode, then we change it to bipolar disorder. It's possible, and people can definitely have that like very up frenzied state, but it's not as common by far, right? For people to only have mania. It's possible, but it's not super common. Questions or thoughts or anything for now? We'll talk a lot more about depression here in a second, but. So if somebody has only depression, and I don't mean that to say like depression isn't a lot, but like if they only have the depressive side, no manic side, we would diagnose somebody as having what's called unipolar or major depression. Unipolar means one pole. They're only on the low end, right? So if somebody has unipolar or major depression, then they have depression without any history of mania. And in order to be diagnosed with major or unipolar depression, you have to have what's called a major depressive episode. So we separate these into like manic episodes and depressive episodes for the bipolar diagnosis purpose. But if somebody has a major depressive episode, then they qualify for a diagnosis of major or unipolar depression. Let me erase this. So we can look at some of the criteria for depression. So a major depressive episode lots of different criteria for depression, right? There's a whole like host of different things that people can have. You have to have 5 or more symptoms. Lasting for at least 2 weeks. Now, some people, when they have a depressive episode, it can last months, right? It can be a very, very long time, but it has to last at least 2 weeks to qualify for being a major depressive episode. So you have 5 or more of these different symptoms that we'll put up here. And again, they're causing significant distress and impairment. They're affecting your life in some way. It's more than just being sad, right? Depression is more intense or severe than just sadness. I once heard it described at a conference. Somebody described depression as the anguish of grief mixed with the sluggishness of jet lag, right? And I thought that was kind of a good description. You're emotionally and physically wiped out, despite maybe not doing a whole lot, right? It tends to take quite a bit of a toll. So some of the different symptoms people can have, they can have weight loss or weight gain. Interesting with depression, sometimes people go one way or the other. Sometimes people will eat more and more and more as a way of coping or trying to fill that void or emptiness or sadness that they feel. And so they end up gaining weight. Other people will completely stop eating. They just don't find pleasure in eating anymore and they lose weight. So it can go either way. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you might not have this one symptom. So it might be that you're like alternating between like eating too much and not eating at all, and you end up kind of maintaining, then I guess technically you wouldn't maybe meet this one. So not everybody gains or loses weight, but it definitely can be something that happens for people. You have a diminished interest in pleasurable activities. So things that you used to enjoy, you don't tend to want to do anymore, right? So things that have always brought you a lot of like pleasure or joy in life, you just stop doing them, right? You've always loved to go hang out with friends. You just don't really want to do it anymore. Right? You've always loved playing video games, and even that you just can't get motivated enough to do it, right? So things that you've enjoyed, you have less of an interest in them, right? You don't tend to explore or do things. It's just kind of a lack of pleasure in the things that you used to enjoy. People can develop insomnia or hypersomnia. Insomnia is when you have difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep. Okay, and so a lot of people struggle with insomnia. You can't fall asleep at night or you wake up during the night. Very directly related to poor sleep habits a lot of the time. Poor sleep hygiene, we sometimes say. Hypersomnia is when people sleep all the time. So you have a hard time waking up. You don't want to get out of bed. You're sleeping way too often. So you can see it present either way, where people have a hard time sleeping or they just won't get out of bed and they're sleeping constantly. It can appear in either direction. Sometimes we get, or a lot of the time we get fatigue or like a loss of energy. You're wiped out, tired, exhausted. And you haven't necessarily done anything physically. You're just absolutely fatigued or tired, or you don't have a lot of energy, and you feel very tired, not a lot of motivation to do things. You can have feelings of worthlessness or guilt. Oftentimes people feel like they're worthless, like I'm not worth anything, I can't do anything, like what's the point? Or even feeling guilty for not being able to do the things that you normally do, not having the energy to hang out with people or do stuff in general. You have a reduced ability to think or concentrate. It's almost like you're in a mental fog. Right? It's really difficult to think straight, to focus. Maybe it makes it taking exams harder because you can't focus enough to think of the answer. Like it's like a mental fog has kind of rolled in and you have a hard time focusing on the world around you. Sometimes it makes it difficult to make decisions for people. People can get very indecisive when they're struggling with depression. There's often thoughts of death or suicide. Sorry, I could add thoughts of. Often see a lot of like suicidality in people who are extremely depressed, right? When you have a lot of hopelessness and worthlessness, it can lead to thoughts of like, maybe I should end my life. Maybe I'd be better off if I wasn't here. Considering suicide, suicidal behaviors or self-harming behaviors sometimes come with depression. And then there's one other one that's not super common, but I'll put it up here anyway. It's called psychomotor agitation. Sometimes when people struggle with depression, they have these kind of like unintentional, purposeless motions that they do over and over again. It might be like wringing your hands or like pulling on the collar of your shirt or pulling on your hair. I don't have a lot of hair in the back to pull on, but pulling on your hair or a shirt. It could be taking on a sweatshirt and putting it on and off over and over again. It could just be any kind of like mindless, repetitive behavior. Little bit different from, you'll see this again when we get to mania. When people are manic, it could be like you can't stop tapping and like moving. You have like too much energy. This tends to be like a slow, purposeless kind of movement that you might do over and over again in a repeated, almost like mindless fashion. Yeah. Yeah. It's not the most common. No, it's way more common in mania. There might not be, right? And sometimes you are aware that you're doing it. I mean, it doesn't always have to be harmful. Like really common, you'll see people just kind of like pace back and forth. Like it's like a mindless, like walking back and forth. It's really common. Like the example that I've seen the most is like people kind of putting something on and taking it off repeatedly. It's like almost like you're not aware that you're doing it. It's really mindless in nature, but it makes more sense when you think about it. This is something common with like ADHD and mania where people are like tapping. It's like you can't stop tapping your foot, like because you have all that energy and you're just, it's again almost mindless. But you can see it here, and usually in like a slower, more mindless kind of way. So if somebody has 5 or more of these different symptoms and they last for at least 2 weeks, right, then we would say that they qualify for a major depressive episode, which then earns them a diagnosis of unipolar or major depression. Now, there are lots of characters in films that are good examples of depression. I have one that I've been booed for multiple times. It just makes me kind of want to play it more. I don't know, that's maybe a little rebellious of me. But I have a clip to play for you of someone who I think is a great example of depression. And you can hate it if you want to. It's totally fine. It's Bella from New Moon. Right? I don't know if anyone like exemplifies depression more than Bella. I don't know, in that movie especially. But of that in this clip, right? She is showing a bunch of these different symptoms. We definitely established the time frame of at least 2 weeks, right? It's been months of her. They show her kind of spinning in that chair, right? It's been months of this time passing, right? She has a lot of things going on, right? Like she isn't eating. You see her just sitting there. She's not hanging out with her friends anymore, doing a lot of just sitting, not a lot of motivation to do anything. She has sleep disturbance, we could say. More than anything, I think I feel bad for Charlie. The more I watch that, I'm like, oh, poor dad. I feel bad for the dad, of course. But you see a lot of these different things in her, right? Insomnia, like a lot of loss of energy, just sitting there. She's got a lot of like suicidality in that book or in the movie. And so I think she's a good example, even if it's not the most popular example. But a lot of different songs and movies and characters in pop culture portraying depression. Again, this is something I think a lot of people are familiar with. Does anyone have people in your life who struggle with depression? Right? A lot of you, any like comments or stories or thoughts or anything? Yeah. Oh no. Okay. Sorry. Yeah, it's still just up. That's fine, right? Any thoughts or stories, comments? Yeah. Yeah. No, so there's actually kind of an example of that in there. The emails that she's sending, we could almost view as a psychomotor agitation, right? She's writing these like mindless emails that aren't actually going through. I don't know if you could read it from where you were, but it said like a failure to send, like on all of them, right? And so you could almost view her like mindless typing of these emails to Alice, right, as a form of this. Right, so her actually sitting there is like the absence of psychomotor agitation, because she's just not even moving. But you could view the emails that way. Actually, it's kind of an interesting variation on that. Yeah.
Just thought of like it's a spoiler for Breaking Bad. What's it called? When his girlfriend dies and he keeps like listening to.
Oh, yeah, he's calling her like this.
Yeah.
And so like that also just like he's like in the pattern.
Right. Oh my gosh, that made me want to watch that again. It's been so many years, right? But yeah, right. That's kind of again, like a mindless gesture that you're repeating over and over again, right? Yeah, you could view that as an example too. Yeah.
There's a psychomotor agitation that
Oh no, so I was saying that her sitting there not moving is like there's no agitation there. So when you're agitated, you're like restless in a way. So think about it as like a restless or kind of mindless behavior that you're doing repeatedly, right? So people who have major depression, right? It's major, right? It's acting 2 weeks or more, 5 or more symptoms. This one is somebody who has like a constant low grade depression. Right, and so persistent depressive disorder used to be called dysthymic disorder. Dysthymia is actually a Greek word meaning melancholy. Right, so this is somebody who's always like low, has low mood all the time, but it's not this severe. So people can have persistent depressive disorder. It's a low-grade depression that lasts 2 or more years, but it's not nearly as disabling as like a major depressive disorder or episode. So it's somebody who has like a very low level of energy, very low mood, maybe dealing with all of these symptoms, but on a much lesser level over the course of 2 years or more. And that might be mistaken for personality. Like it might just be that you think somebody is just kind of very mellow, very low as kind of who they are. But it tends to be a little bit disabling in the sense that it is affecting their life, causing issues, but it's longer lasting and lower grade than like a major depressive episode. Yeah.
Is it common for people with persistent depressive disorder to also experience major depressive episodes within?
So if they experience a major depressive episode, then actually it would change their diagnosis. So if they have it on that level.
But okay, well, could you have like a persistent depressive disorder for
Sure.
years and years, but then have like major depressive episodes scattered through them?
You could, but if you did, you would likely end up having either the diagnosis changed or amended. So what might happen is you have somebody who's diagnosed with this, right? Persistent depressive disorder, and then they have like a full-blown major depressive episode. And so what might happen, and it would depend on the therapist and their judgment, they might keep this and then make a note in their diagnosis that they've also had major depressive episodes. Or depending on their judgment, they could decide to change the diagnosis from this to major depression. So major depression can last way longer than 2 weeks. For some, it lasts years, sadly. So it could be either. It would depend on the therapist's judgment of whether it was like an isolated thing and which one fit better. And that's one of the issues with therapy and like labels and diagnoses, right? A lot of it is very judgment dependent on what the therapist thinks. One person suffering from the same stuff could go to 5 different therapists and receive 5 different diagnoses, right? Depending on what they see or don't see and that person's judgment. It's a little bit of a problem sometimes. Yeah.
So how last like common? Like
Yeah.
would you say under a year?
Yeah, I mean, on average, I would say the most common is like through, I want to say 2 to 3 or 2 to 4 months is like the most common. Some people, it's literally like only a couple of weeks, but for a lot of people, I want to say it was somewhere around like 3 to 4 months. I remember reading an article about it like a couple of years ago, and I want to say it was about 3 to 4 months was the average duration. And then people can cycle out of it and have another one, weeks later or months later. So it isn't always an isolated thing. It can be, you have a depressive episode and then kind of normal, typical mood for a while, and then another depressive episode. And that's really common with that disorder.
Which category was seasonal depression?
Yeah. SAD, it has the best acronym for a disorder that you could ask for. SAD, seasonal affective disorder, right? And it's its own type of depression, right? And we aren't talking about it here, but it is its own diagnosable type. And the key with that one is that it happens in the winter months, and it's thought to be very directly connected to a lack of sunlight. And so the treatment for that is to sit in front of a light box for a certain amount of time each day to get more sun and light, which actually helps to alleviate seasonal depression. Kind of odd, right? I mean, it's very common in places like Alaska or the Pacific Northwest, or maybe even the Midwest, where there's not a lot of sun in the winter months. But it is its own unique type of depression. Glad you asked. It isn't common here where we live, where we get sun all the time, right? I'm like, I have the opposite. I get like depressed when it's sunny and happy when it rains. I'm in the wrong part of the world, but it is common in places where there's not a lot of sunshine. Yeah. We'll talk about some of the causes. A lot of it is thought to be very like neurotransmitter related. So it's interesting, there's been some current research on that is kind of almost debunking a little bit of like our thought on the neurotransmitters and depression. It's not anything definitive yet, but they're starting to challenge that. But a lot of it is thought to be either triggered by an event, right, or a chemical imbalance, or it could be both, right? And so for some people, it's random in the sense that it's chemicals in their brain that are just fluctuating, right? And so they develop major depression as a result, or it could be from something that happened to you that you're still struggling to maybe cope with or deal with, or both. So those are the big culprits, and then genetics sometimes too, can also play a role. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. Was there another hand over here? I didn't want to skip you. If you had your hand up, I don't want to miss you, right? Next. Okay. So these are, again, major depression. You have a major depressive episode to be diagnosed with unipolar depression, or persistent depressive disorder, long grade, low key level of depression. Like again, no. So some of the explanations, like you just asked about, to talk about a little bit more, depression does tend to run in families. I think I have a 27% chance of inheriting it from a parent. So if you have a biological parent that has depression, you are 27% more likely than the average person to develop depression. Now, that does not mean that you are doomed to get it. 27% is not an incredibly high number, but you might be more vulnerable than the average person. If both of your parents have it, those odds go up. But again, it isn't necessarily something that you're doomed to get. There are a lot of biochemical factors at play with depression. A lot. These are really thought to be one of the biggest culprits of depression. People have low activity of the neurotransmitters norepinephrine and serotonin. So norepinephrine and serotonin, also dopamine a little bit as well, but norepinephrine and serotonin are huge culprits for depression. People have not enough of them. They have low activity of these two different neurotransmitters. And so what happens is we have to find ways to stimulate those to increase more and get more of them. We can do that with medication. We can also do that with like brain stimulation methods that we'll talk about, but it's really one of the biggest culprits. And then if you look at SAD specifically, right, seasonal affective disorder, it's that people also are struggling with some other things like melatonin and cortisol, hormones that are released that play a role with our exposure to sunlight. But for depression, norepinephrine, serotonin, and also dopamine are the big culprits. And I mentioned a minute ago, so there was this massive like meta-analysis study that came out, it was like 3 months ago. And they were saying that norepinephrine and serotonin and dopamine might not actually play the role that we think they do in depression. And it's something that is really being investigated now, like in a very different way. They were looking at all these studies, putting them together and analyzing them, saying that there's a chance that these two things don't actually contribute the way that we've always thought they have. So we'll see the future on that. For now, it's really thought these are big culprits, along with there being a brain circuit for depression. And this is a relatively new discovery, like in the last 10 to 12 years, we've discovered a brain circuit for depression. It's a network of brain structures that work together almost like in a perfect storm. They trigger each other and they produce certain kind of issues and emotional reactions. And there is a brain circuit for depression. So people who have depression, it's thought there are different parts of the brain that are working together in like the perfect bad way in order to cause this problem. So there's a couple of different things right there. I have them written up here. I'll put them on the board in a way where you can see them better. But there's different parts of the brain involved in the brain circuit. Erase this. So one of them is the hippocampus. The hippocampus is the part of the brain that's in charge of memory. It's kind of like our memory index region, and it's thought to play a really big role in depression. It's part of this brain circuit. The prefrontal cortex. Right, the frontal part of the brain that does a lot with decision making and personality and judgment and so on. The amygdala, which plays a big role in emotional reactions to things. And then there's one tiny little area called Brodmann Area 25. And this is a tiny, tiny little region of the brain, but it's really rich in serotonin receptors. And serotonin is one of the biggest culprits with depression. And so what we do and what we've learned is that we can stimulate this tiny little area of the brain, and that will cause more serotonin to be produced. And when we do things like electroconvulsive therapy or shock therapy or transcranial magnetic stimulation or any of those, what it does is it's activating these different brain circuits. It's increasing blood flow and activity, which is thought to alleviate depression. And so we didn't know for a lot of years why things like ECT were working, but we know now that they're acting on this brain circuit. They're increasing that activity in some areas, reducing it in others to kind of eliminate that perfect storm. Yeah.
Is like biologically, I guess it makes sense why would humans like develop a way to teach that like that? Like there's no advantage to be depressed. This is so why would like our brain make a way to be depressed?
Right. I mean, why would we? No, that's a tough one, right? I mean, why does our brain allow for so many different things like addiction and obesity and like all these things, like even though we maybe know what's best for us, it doesn't always mean that that's what happens. But it's more that all these structures aren't working in harmony the way that they're supposed to. So if things are working properly and your neurotransmitters are in a proper like regulation, then you're okay. But when they all work together in that perfect storm in like a maladaptive way, that's when we get there. But yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Like, I'm not sure we could ever have the answer to like, why would our bodies and brains do that to us, right? Why would they betray us like that? But it definitely happens, and it happens frequently, unfortunately. Yeah.
So like you say, it's like genetically, it could have to be like genetics, like if, let's say like someone was pregnant and they were like depressed, like if something happened while they were like pregnant, would like, how like the baby kind of feels, if the mom feels.
Sure. Sure. So from a genetic standpoint, it wouldn't matter so much like the mom's mood when she was pregnant. It would just be passed down like on a chromosomal genetic level, right? But when somebody is really depressed when they're pregnant and they have higher levels of like cortisol being released into their system, stress hormones being released, those do go to and potentially affect that unborn baby. And so what you can end up with is, affecting their mood or affecting their regulation. Like if you have too many different substances, those can affect the baby. If your mood is really, really like high and stressed, right, that can go to the baby as well. It's hard to know how much, right? We don't really have like a concrete way of measuring that yet, but it is thought that it can affect that baby's like mood or development or propensity toward like a mood disorder later in life, or addiction later in life, or stress later in life, all sorts of things. We're getting a lot of new evidence like that if you have like a mother or a woman who's carrying a baby and they have high levels of stress, that what that does is it actually changes the nervous system of the baby to be more susceptible to stress and more vulnerable to stress later in life. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff about that that's being discovered. So we're learning more and more, but it definitely can play a role in that baby's functioning and mood later in life, for sure. Yeah. With what? Yeah, I mean, it's a proposed factor in a lot of different disorders, right? And we're seeing it, like I said, especially with stress. There's a whole book, The Body Keeps the Score. I can't remember if I read it up on the board earlier or not, but it's this really interesting book that's all about how our like parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems, as they're developing in the womb, can be directly affected by that like mother or woman who's carrying that baby and what they put in their body, their level of stress, and so on. It can lead to a propensity for PTSD, for ADHD, for all sorts of other things. So yeah, there's some proposed stuff, but it's hard to prove that that's what caused it, right? So it's more like correlational, but it's definitely out there for sure. So if we believe that biological factors are the culprit, then we're going to attack depression from a biological perspective, right? So if we think that somebody has an imbalance of neurotransmitters, then we're going to give them an antidepressant drug to help balance out those neurotransmitters. So antidepressants are medications used to try and alleviate depression, right? Hence the name. Though they also have a lot of other uses. They're used a lot for anxiety and a whole host of other things. But the point here is to help alleviate symptoms of depression by increasing the amount of norepinephrine and dopamine and serotonin in our system. Now there's 4 different types. We only have like 2-3 minutes left, so I don't want to get into them and then like we'll stop halfway in. So I'll just stop here. And then what we'll do on Tuesday is we'll cover these and then we'll keep going through the rest of the chapter. And that will be our plan for next week. So I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. I will see you in October, right? It's October next week, right? That's wild. I got to start eating more candy. Like I got to get caught up. I got to build my tolerance for Halloween. Time to go. But have a wonderful weekend. If I didn't get your case study for some reason, make sure you turn that into me and I'll see you on Tuesday.
We still get.
What was that? A parent text. I know.